Welcome back, folks. We're going to take a look at how FDR and the Roosevelt administration attempt to tackle the Great Depression. We saw the causes of the Depression already. We saw the Hoover administration's response to it, believing it would turn around, and it didn't. And so the immediate relief, right, this kind of like very quick short-term relief did not do enough to solve the larger issues at hand. And so we're going to see how someone else takes a stab at it and all the debates that flow from that. But as we get closer to the exam, really think about the essence of what I'm about to say when we're talking about AP exams. It's not even about this question as a whole, but remember that every question you're going to get in any written format is an opinion-based question. As long as it can be historically defensible, you're fine. It doesn't have to be a single answer in particular that they're looking for. They're giving you a chance to give your opinion. In this case, what are the most important causes of the Great Depression in your mind, right? That's what the question is asking. What were the most important ones and why? Take a stance and defend it. So really, as we're going through, we would love, of course, to remember every bit of information we come in contact with, but that's not always necessarily possible. But as we're sorting information in our brain, remember the big picture trends that are coming up and try to have a specific example that may help you. For example, we're going to cover a lot of government agencies today. You don't need to know all of them, but maybe you might want to just try to focus on really ingraining one. So let's get into it. So in 1932, we are going to see Herbert Hoover lose re-election, Franklin Delano Roosevelt take over. Roosevelt is going to really be seen as the savior if you want to look at Hoover as the victim or the buffoon. FDR was able to really unite a lot of different people under the Democratic Party and wins in an absolute landslide. It is not even close. And you're going to see this with a lot of FDR's elections that we're going to see. He appeals to Protestants and Catholics, again, two different spectrums of religious areas, farmers and industrial workers, native-born Americans, as well as immigrants. And so we are going to see this massive umbrella coalition really start to form. Now, Franklin Delano Roosevelt is going to be the only president who is elected more than twice. He's actually going to win 4 elections in a row. You can see him here. He suffers from a disease called polio, but he's going to take a variety of different steps to try to cover that up and conceal that in order to appear stronger. But he is going to try to bring confidence as well as economic security back to the American people. You see him go around on speaking tours like this one. I pledge to you, I pledge myself, a new deal for the American people, a new way to approach life, a new way to approach this world. And so we're going to look at what his new deal he's offering in the midst of the Great Depression. When you look at his message, it is incredibly, incredibly popular, and Hoover is incredibly unpopular. Roosevelt wins 89% of the Electoral College vote to Hoover only winning 11%. And you see this mass sweep of the country. When we're looking at even voting groups, for example, this is a look at voting groups in Chicago from 1924 all the way to the 1932 election, you are going to see a massive swing for this number is the percentage of these ethnic groups that voted Democrat, and you see a massive swing all the way across the board from the left to the right of massive support from urban groups, from immigrant groups for the Democratic Party. We often look at the first 100 days as a presidency, in any presidency, to really look at the biggest period of change that often takes place and the boldest swings to see, are they able to actually deliver on some of their campaign promises? But by the time FDR takes over in 1933, the U.S. economy was on the brink of a collapse. It had gone so far that it almost seemed it was possibly unrepairable. Unemployment was at 25%, meaning 1 out of every 4 Americans that actively could work and wanted a job couldn't find one, couldn't secure one. 38 states had bank failures. FDR had to request from Congress more power to begin his New Deal programs to try to provide relief for people, some immediate action, a plan to recover to get us out of this situation that we are currently in of the Great Depression, and to try to reform it for the future. And so This was kind of phrased as asking for broad executive power that would be given to me if we were in fact invaded by a foreign foe, almost wartime-like power. And so we are going to see this massive ballooning of the power of the presidency, and we'll see what he does with it. Now, we can look at a lot of the New Deal agencies that are created. There's so many of them. Some people call it the alphabet soup because there's so many and they're all these like 3-letter acronyms. But we largely can categorize them into 3 things: relief, reform, recovery. Right? Relief, providing immediate aid right now. This might come in the form of like a stimulus check, right? Kind of something that was seen during COVID, try to provide immediate relief. Reform, try to fix things for the future so it doesn't happen again. And then recovery, pull us out of the Great Depression. FDR gives his famous speech that most people know him for, is that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror which paralyzed needed efforts to convert retreat into advance. Most people believe that this is about World War II and fighting the Nazis, but it's actually about the Great Depression, that we need to fix confidence in America to try to believe that we can get better, that we can improve, and that needs to be part of our focus. And so FDR also focuses ways of also quelling American fears as well as trying to solve economic issues that helps him continuously garner support. It's not universal and unwavering, but it is definitely a step in the right direction. FDR tries to tackle this fear by directing things himself. He uses the modern technology of the day of mass communication, the radio, that a lot of Americans now have or have easy access to after the 1920s, and use it to speak directly into the ears of Americans, coming directly into their home, talking to them about problems that are going on, what things are actually being done, instilling confidence that improvements are being made, and what support they can receive. And this is going to continue into World War II when eventually it starts. But this is an example of him doing this. Also, his wife, Eleanor Roosevelt, the First Lady, has a huge role in this as well. She goes around the country, and all of these dots you see on the map are different cities which she visits to speak and do work in, and to show that the federal government is there and we care about you and we're there and we're present. And that is another way of instilling confidence, is feeling like people are cared about and trying to get them to trust the government once more. All of this self-confidence and support is great, but it needs to culminate in something tangible. And so if we look at the first 100 days of the New Deal, or the first New Deal rather, we're really going to see where his focus lies. And the number one issue that he tries to tackle is the banking crisis. In the Hoover administration, 1,500 banks were closing every single year. So FDR saw this as a crucial problem to address, the number one problem, or his first problem he's going to try to address. So why is this so important? Number one, the banks are the source of most loans, and that's going to hurt businesses from opening up or sustaining being open. And so we need to get that regulated. But in order for these banks to stay open, to have money to loan, they need to have people that are keeping their money with the bank, investing their money in the bank. And if people lost everything entirely in the stock market crash, they're going to be very unwilling to do so. So as a result, one of the first things that he does, he declares a 4-day bank holiday. Essentially closes all banks in the country. It eliminates the ability for people to withdraw their funds and stops them from being closed. During that same time period, also, the Congress passes the Emergency Banking Relief Act that gave Roosevelt the power to really regulate banking in the United States. He had the ability to close or also fund very weak banks, and also the ability to open new government-aided banks. During the same time period as well, Congress passes something called the Glass-Steagall Act that creates this branch called the FDIC, which guarantees that any bank deposits you have are guaranteed up to $5,000. So if there is a massive collapse again, up to 5,000 of your dollars is going to be protected. And that number has continuously gone up, but it's something we see today. So banks are going to be regulated. The economic system is going to be slightly reformed, not drastically changed, but it's an attempt to try to address the problems and pump the brakes. Now you see FDIC insurances of over $100,000. So this is a lasting effect of the New Deal that continually is around. Now, did it work? That's the big question. Let's look at the data. Largely, yes. If you take a look at the amount, and you notice through the 1820s, there's some closures, 1830s, 1833, there's a spike in 1834, but following that, right, or 1833, when we get to 1834, the bank closures are at zero or nominal, right? And one historian says capitalism was saved in just 8 days. So during this period of Reformation, so we can see some tangible effects absolutely taking place. But the greatest success of the first New Deal was its ability to provide relief, right, to unemployed citizens. And there's a bunch of different ways that this was done. But some of this could come in the form of checks, of money, of stimulus checks. Others could come in the form of jobs. So there were some small relief checks that were given out to maybe about 15% of Americans. Welfare programs were funded by FERA, the Federal Emergency Relief Act. So we see some progress there. Again, relief. It's a temporary solution. So think if you had a really, really, really bad sunburn, right? Jumping into a pool or cold water is going to cool you down for a little bit. It's not going to solve the issue, but it's going to take a little bit of the heat off. It also goes into the creation of a bunch of different government agencies, and this is where we get into this part of this conversation where there's so much information that can get chucked at you. You don't need to know it all, but know that there are different ways that the government tries to handle this problem, and maybe try to internalize at least one of these agencies. Right? You have the CCC, the Civilian Conservation Corps, that gave jobs to urban men. You have the AAA, the Agricultural Adjustment Administration, which subsidized for farmers. So that provides subsidies for farmers. So you have all of these different ways of helping different types of people. You see examples here of CCC workers paving roads, planting trees, building bridges. The Civil Works Administration created drainage systems for an airfield. They also helped dredge a lake. You see here an image for the AAA where farmers are receiving stimulus checks to kind of help them get by. And when you look at the amount of American families accepting some form of government relief in 1933, we see a variety of effects from state to state. Those states in red, over 15% of families are on relief. Those in green, 8 to 15%. And then those in that baby blue or that lighter blue color are below 8%. But there are effects seen everywhere, all over the country. And you can look up online maps and examples like the New Deal map or the memory of the New Deal online, where you can see examples in your community or communities all the way around the country of where the New Deal was used to build everything from sidewalks to buildings to dams to police stations to schools and everything else in between. Another example, right, was NIRA, the National Industry Recovery Act. And so there was an attempt at economic recovery early on in the first 100 days of the FDR administration. There was an attempt to take the U.S. off the gold standard, an attempt at ending prohibition, which culminates in the passage of the 21st Amendment. Alcohol, right, given back to people might make them a little bit happier, but also you can tax that alcohol and gain more revenue for the country, right? Prompting a legal basis for consuming alcohol and creating an industry there. The National Recovery Administration started setting max hours and minimum wages for workers. There was ways of trying to stimulate industry by fixing prices and setting production limits. So trying to get more people back into the world of industry. The PWA built public roads and bridges and buildings. And the PWA, which eventually is going to be renovated to the WPA, is one of the largest, most broad sweeping examples of the New Deal legislation that built so many different things that you can probably find in your communities, your towns as well. Here's posters for it as well, where there's kind of, again, a propaganda campaign to a degree, right? Getting the word out, jobs, activism, effects in the community that people can see, right? Where people aren't just receiving money, they're working for money, and so building up more self-confidence as well. You see another example of poster here, the NRA, we do our part here at this restaurant, right? Putting up a poster for it as well. There were other examples as well of FDR's first New Deal trying to focus on some long-term reforms as well. Like if you look at the Tennessee Valley Authority, dams were created in 7 states so that they could have cheap hydroelectric power, create more jobs in building them, running them, and also provide facilities for Americans as well that didn't necessarily have them. The Security and Exchange Commission regulated the stock market to try to prevent another stock market crash. So you have all of these different government agencies that are then put in place to try to help prevent problems happening again. On this map, you can see examples of different dams built by the TVA, the Tennessee Valley Authority, that was then used to harness hydroelectric power that can be utilized in these areas. But there were critics to the New Deal programs. They weren't all widely accepted. For example, there's going to be critics that are going to claim it's way too socialistic, right? Connection to socialism. Remember back to the topics on World War I, where after those court cases in 1919, like socialism during World War I is really going to be seen as way too radical and extremist and going to be shut down. Different electric companies attacked the TVA for selling cheaper electricity and eliminating competition, that this was government ownership, creeping towards communism in some areas, which socialism would be kind of a more direct form of that, of taking over this one industry. So we do see some criticisms here, and it's not without significant pushback, but there is change happening nonetheless. So the first 100 days of FDR's administration were temporary solutions to solve problems. So they weren't fully wide-reaching. But we can argue that psychologically, Americans believe that FDR was actively responding to the Great Depression. And because of that, he's going to continue to receive more support, not only in the form of support directly from the public in future elections, but also support in the fact that they're going to elect legislators, they're going to support New Deal legislation, which is going to allow him to pass even more. So it'll continue to compound. FDR is going to have a large amount of support that is going to continuously compound. You are going to see even his competitors in upcoming elections, like Alf Landon, who's the Republican nominee in 1936, running against him for president, who says even the hand of an iron dictator is in preference to that of a paralytic stroke, meaning that although if you may criticize FDR from taking too much power, what he's done has been much better than what we were left in the Great Depression prior to him. You have Will Rogers, who's a famous cowboy actor, Western actor. Says the whole country is with him just so he does something. If he burned down the Capitol, we would cheer and say, well, we at least got a fire started anyhow. He has so much support. But it's not going to be as universally easy in his second term as it was in his first term. So we're going to take a look after his re-election. How does the new attempts at the New Deal change? Is there going to be more pushback, or in what way? And although this sounds great for the first term, FDR doesn't solve the Great Depression. The New Deal doesn't solve the Depression. It doesn't end it. It does provide relief, and it makes things a little bit better, and there is some drum of support for it, but Americans are going to become increasingly frustrated. So much so that not all Americans are going to openly support the New Deal. Because not everybody was helped by the New Deal. It focused on the medium problems. It didn't really help unskilled workers or sharecroppers, and so not everybody is going to benefit from all of the New Deal policies, but there is a large enough contingency that's going to get him elected in 1936. But in 1935, we are going to see a shift in FDR's policy from just trying to provide relief to try to actually reform to fix these issues from happening again. But there are going to be more vocal critics of him really starting to form that are going to start to get national attention. One of them is a priest named Father Charles Coughlin, who really called for nationalizing U.S. banks, pulling them under federal control. He was an anti-Semite in radio sermons, so that appealed to a very specific niche sect of the country, but it's not going to be a universal appeal, so that's not going to take over, but there's going to be criticism there. Then you have Francis Townsend, who really appeals to the elderly, who believes that a $200 a month plan should be sent to anyone over 60 in order to stimulate the economy, that we can't just focus on certain classes. There are other classes that are being forgotten about. So you are going to see some of these ideas slightly adopted into FDR's policy, not entirely, but we're going to see remnants of what his critics have said start to creep into some legislation as the New Deal progresses on. Here you see a picture of Father Charles Coughlin giving a big speech over the radio. Here you see Dr. Francis Townsend, who is pushing for what eventually becomes the concept of Social Security here, but there's different support in different areas of the country for sure. One of the most vocal opponents to FDR was the Louisiana Senator Huey Long, who proposes his plan that he calls Share the Wealth. Take from the rich, 100% tax on all personal income over $1 million, and give it out to the poor. Every citizen gets $2,500 per year. This idea that you don't need over $1 million, it's drastically in excess. And so these ideas are extreme. And there are people that feel that FDR has not gone far enough, for sure, on his side of the aisle. There are also going to be people that are going to say that he has gone too far, like Republicans. So he is not going to be universally beloved by everyone. And so he's going to be caught in this crossfire, but he's going to continuously to merge and adapt over time to meet the needs that are set in front of him. Because of these ideas of his opponents are becoming more and more popular, a lot of them are ultimately going to be incorporated into some of his own policies or the New Deal policies to come. So in the midterms in 1934, we're going to see Democrats increase their control of Congress. And so this second wave of change is going to continuously happen. And so more New Deal programs are going to roll out that are different than the initial relief programs we saw to begin with. The biggest example of this second wave of reform is the WPA, the Works Progress Administration. It deals with just about everything: direct assistance programs, getting into the streets, putting jobs in people's hands, right? Over 10 million people were hired by the national government in an attempt to stimulate the economy. They have work. There's things that are taking their time now in the day. They're working towards progress. There is a recovery of kind of the American psyche, building projects, art projects. Over $10 million is pumped into the economy. It never employed enough people to get people to be able to purchase, but it did make the Great Depression more bearable. And it starts revitalizing towns that after the wars are over, World War II is over, that we are going to see an America that is largely revamped and not touched by warfare, that it is going to be in a great, great place economically and socially in the aftermath of World War II. The WPA did a variety of different projects, and it was not so much about what was getting done as long as work was being done. So everything is being built, right? From hospitals and schools and airport fields, but also moving leaf piles, digging out ditches for communities, right? So that people are continuously working. They feel like they have agency. Again, trying to rebuild the psyche. It doesn't completely solve the Great Depression, but it feels as if people are taking action, that they are actually recovering and seeing these details of recovery. Just like anything for this course, the AP curriculum does provide us a lot of different flexibility to go into any local example you want to pull to support your arguments or understand what's actually happening with these bigger developments. So for example, you don't have to focus on specific programs in the New Deal or specific building projects in the New Deal. You can focus on your own communities. So I thought it'd be fun to just pop into what's going on in Rhode Island, examples with the New Deal. One good example of this was McCoy Stadium that was over in Pawtucket. That used to be the stadium for the feeder program for the Boston Red Sox professional baseball team. When you look at everything that goes into it, right, the materials required, digging out the land for it, building the foundation, the construction jobs for over 2 years straight. It then brings entertainment to the area, which has more jobs, right, inside the stadium, running it, the concessions, the players, the advertising, local businesses and restaurants in the area getting revenue from it. Exposure, regional attention to people in the area driving to it, which leads to not only the business itself of the stadium and the surrounding areas, but even things like gas stations are getting more business. So it's examples like this, or even everything from like building the sidewalks, any task to give Americans jobs, to keep them busy, to build up self-confidence that they're earning their money instead of just receiving money, and really starting to pull the country back on its feet. McCoy Stadium is just one example of many things throughout not only the state of Rhode Island, but all the way other parts about the country, where something was produced for and in a city by citizens of a city that they retained ownership of. And so it was just until recently when the stadium was torn down and the areas around it were demolished. But it's now being converted into more public use facilities as well. It's the spot of the brand new Pawtucket High School that's being built. So this whole idea of things produced for citizens, by citizens in their area, in their towns, revitalizing the towns, that once the war, the Depression, and then the subsequent World War is over, America is not only going to be left largely unscathed by war, but is going to be, once again, an economic powerhouse and have a completely revitalized nation infrastructure that's ready for that post-war boom. There are a bunch of different examples that you can check out at the livingnewdeal.org website, and you can check out this map, which is so awesome, and you can find examples of New Deal projects all around the country. But just in the immediate area of northwestern Rhode Island, right, you have the Gloucester Elementary School, Patchett Elementary School that were eventually replaced by Fogarty and West Gloucester, but these were used for multiple decades. In Smithfield and Johnston, their town halls were built. There's a water improvement system that is built during the New Deal projects in Smithfield. Burrville has the state sanatorium, which is like for people that have severely contagious diseases, and in order to kind of improve like a medical facilities there. Roger Williams State Park here in Rhode Island, eventually home to the zoo and amongst many other things in the center of the state. It's another great example of public facilities that were built by the New Deal. The New Deal is not just projects and relief checks, it's also funding education programs that are around the country. And it's not just for children, but for adults to further their own education, to find other forms of improvement and kind of enrichment, whether it be studying social studies, homemaking, businesses, math, arts, language, or community centers running athletic groups or sports teams or intramurals, or have libraries, or having opportunities for people to have public facilities available to them. In addition to that, also putting out health initiatives to make sure that people are healthy, to cut back on medical costs, to make sure that the workforce is staying healthy and able, including trying to encourage balanced diets and when you actually need to go see a physician. Art projects are also funded for beautification, for cultural enrichment all across the country, by adults, by children, in urban environments, in rural environments. You see full community murals that are built, highlighting the labor and the hardworking nature of Americans. Music projects are also produced by the WPA, band concerts and music instruction, just a variety of wide swath of things. And that also includes the theater, right? And a lot of the music and the art styles and the theatrical projects that are produced are going to be very pro-American, are going to be about unity, about hardworking, right? About people that work with their hands, kind of reinforcing that people can see themselves in art and in other forms of literature as well. And so you see this real comprehensive approach for attempting to bring in a wide swath of Americans, to bring in a wide background of interests and needs all across the country. In addition to that, right, we see the pickup of some of his opponents' suggestions. The Social Security Act is created in 1935, which is the first welfare program for the aged, disabled, or unemployed. The basic premise is that if you have worked in this country and paid into Social Security for your entire life, and you have worked for this country until you can no longer work anymore, then the country should be able to take care of you. Now, ironically, the country is drastically against socialism at this time, and it's a very, very dirty word in American politics, and it's kind of like the kiss of death in many ways. This is a very socialist program, but Americans have kind of accepted this as part of what makes America great. You are going to have ways to not only reach the workers, but also reach those that are unable to work now, that are in the older phases of their lives. Unemployment compensation begins to be funded in national taxes and then administered by the states. Welfare payments for the blind, handicapped, and needy children are also incorporated in the Social Security Act, but it's not without its own criticisms. People that were more liberal than FDR definitely criticized him, arguing that this did not do enough, and more conservatives, right, on the Republican side are going to argue that it violated individualism, self-reliance, and it's making people needy and reliant on the government. But regardless, the Social Security program created America's first welfare program to help individuals, and it's definitely a landmark in that way, for sure. Last things we're really getting into are some reforms about labor. The Wagner Act was passed during this time period that created the National Labor Relations Board that oversaw management affairs. Some people look at this as like the Magna Carta, the original founding document for labor rights in this country. And this is a huge win for unions. It mandated management to negotiate with unions about pay, hours, conditions, if a majority of workers vote for a union, that they have to recognize it. And the Fair Labor Standards Act, which was passed a couple of years later in 1938, created the very first minimum wage and maximum hour laws for this country. This was largely aimed to help those that were not in unions, and so it helped a larger portion of Americans that were not unionized. And so this is where we start getting the 40 hours a week concept, and also like a minimum wage. It starts at 40 cents per hour, but obviously it will increase. And there's debates even today about, is the minimum wage high enough, federal or state? So now that leads us to our conclusion, which is how successful were the New Deal programs? You can see in this cartoon, often depicted as Roosevelt's children, right? His projects, right? Well, how successful were they? We got to evaluate that before we pack it up for the day. So what can we say? Let's look at it in the terms of relief, reform, and recovery. These were the three phases that the New Deal did attempt to address. But the New Deal did not end the Depression. Despite it being very successful in providing immediate relief and easing some of the suffering, it did not end the Depression. Very important note, explicit in the curriculum, and also a historical fact that some people try to overgeneralize. It also didn't necessarily bring about economic recovery. It lessened the significance of it, and it didn't redistribute income, but it did provide some more security for the American people, especially some of those later programs for the unemployed, for those that are older, for those kind of getting more security in banking. There are expansions of rights for laborers, right? And so we are going to see some major reforms going forward. We are going to see changes in how governments suggest about how spending should occur. And we see deficit spending, so spending a lot to help the public, and that this is going to be offset later. But largely, we really see this trend where the government assumes responsibility for the citizens much larger. This is a big trend. And so this is the beginning of a form of government, or a structure of government known as the welfare state, which essentially means that the government assumes primary responsibility for like the social and economic well-being of its citizens. So we see a much more active government in the lives of their people. There are debates over whether this is a good thing or a bad thing. Is this a positive legacy or a negative legacy? For some, looking at the long-term ramifications of the debt or the involvement. But regardless, this is a massive change springing forward. More government involvement, more government power. It doesn't solve the Great Depression, but it is a massive landmark. And we're going to see very quickly in the coming years in this course where the end is going to come. And that's going to come with the outbreak of World War II and America's role in it. So we're going to pump the brakes for now. We'll see you in the next video, folks. Good luck. Happy studying.